There's been lots of Star Wars films, TV shows, and Star Wars games made over the past few decades, but none that have told a detailed story of how a Sith Lord became a Sith Lord. None like the story this game was going to tell. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. This is new footage from the cancelled Darth Maul game that was going to tell the tale of a young Darth Maul, manipulated to the dark side by Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine. This game would have contributed to Star Wars canon and lore and explored the origins of Maul and how he was seduced to the dark side, while also depicting the death of Darth Plagueis, Palpatine's master, tie-ins to the Clone Wars, and eventually even the inclusion of Darth Talon, who you'd play as alongside Darth Maul. I recently spoke to Dan Borth, the creator of this Darth Maul game and former CEO of Redfly Studio. He talked about the true reasons behind why it was cancelled by LucasArts, the game's connection to Disney, EA, and what it was like working on the game with the maker himself, George Lucas. In the interview, he revealed new, never-before-released details about the production of Maul, gameplay mechanics, story, his meeting with Lucas, and why the game was going to be so unique and influential. Just a heads up, this video contains some explicit language. I first asked Dan about working on the concept of the game with LucasArts and about his meeting with George Lucas.
When we started, they knew they wanted to make a Darth Maul game. They wanted us to come up with a story, which was great. But we all knew that we were going to have to go on this road where whatever we did, whatever we came up with, whether it was us or them or combined, it had to go through George Lucas.
Right.
We all knew that this could all be for nothing.
Originally, the developers at Redfly Studio, the dev team working on the Darth Maul game, wanted to tell the story of a young Darth Maul becoming a Sith Lord. They wanted to include in-game decision-making as a gameplay mechanic for Maul.
We want to have a real story where you are playing this kid, around 12 years old. You see nuts to bolts what makes a Sith Lord, and it's a lot of shit, right? And you make all those same mistakes, and we put you in scenarios where the right choice is the choice of the Sith, not because it's morally the correct choice. It's as a survivability mechanic. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to tell Sidious no, and then, he'll kill you just because the president of LucasArts or whatever says, hey, thumbs up. That doesn't mean shit.
Because George is still in charge, right?
Yeah, George is always in charge. Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Gotcha.
So, he's Star Wars, and no developers ever met with George Lucas. It was me and another guy, James, our lead designer.
Okay, sure.
He was great. He spent a lot of time with us. He clearly knew what he wanted.
Dan's meeting with Lucas created some confusion about the direction of the project. He'd been working on the game with his team for months, but George Lucas had different ideas for the game's story. I asked Dan what happened here.
So we never got the chance to tell our story.
Okay.
He never sat down and said, let's hear what you guys have. When we sat down, he just started telling us what he wanted.
Right.
And it was completely different than all the stuff we had been working on, all the stuff prior to episode 1, all the stuff, because then there was a movement towards, once we were shown the Clone Wars stuff, we were like, okay, let's integrate this. And, they're looking at Darth Maul to be, 1, 2, 3 game, a trilogy. Why wouldn't we do the Clone Wars stuff?
Sure.
Why wouldn't we bring in Savage Opress? Why wouldn't we bring in all of it? We went out there and Dave Filoni showed us what he was doing with Clone Wars and the Maul storyline, and it was cool.
I'm Dave Filoni, Supervising Director of Star Wars The Clone Wars, and I'm here to talk about the return of Darth Maul.
I sense a presence, Master.
And, he was a fan of Maul, and he was very supportive. George is just going to have to say thumbs up, or he's going to tell you exactly what he wants. So usually he tells you exactly what he wants. How many characters have you seen turn to the dark side? Really nobody.
It's either they're there or they do the Anakin thing, right?
Yeah. Well, the Anakin thing is as detailed as we've gotten, which is nothing, right? He turns almost immediately in a movie. I'm sure we get little, he's mad at this, he's mad at that, but there's no I didn't feel like there was any real pressure to turn. Anakin should have said, hey, I'm going to Tatooine to free my mother. She's a slave. And the Jedi Order say, well, you can't do that. And he's like, fuck you, I'm doing it because slavery's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it, right? That should have been the problem between Anakin and the Jedi. And everybody watching would have been like, you should be removing slavery from the galaxy.
Yeah, it gives him purpose and a reason to
do
it.
Yeah, it gives him purpose, but everybody's down for that, right? Like everybody, you understand that fight, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, Jedi, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Based on what you've said, it feels like decision-making may have been a part of your game. Is that something that you were trying to build into it? Like, you can choose this path or this path?
Yeah, definitely. The past, the past weren't good or bad. You had choices to make that would either infuriate Sidious or make him happy. We didn't just want the game to just be like, here's some instruction, you go do this. And that's boring.
Yeah.
We wanted you to make as many decisions as possible. We also couldn't go completely rogue and make him into a good character, but there were times in the game where we could construct story arc, little side missions and side stories where we could showcase Maul's humanity or whatever's left.
It sounds like Old Republic kind of stuff. Like you're choosing your path and you're choosing where the character goes and, which direction, even though ultimately in your case, it's going to lead to the same thing. He becomes a Sith Lord, Darth Maul.
Yeah. And you are under training. You are under the guise of Sidious, but also Sidious in our game, what was really cool is Sidious wasn't the Emperor. Plagueis was. Part of our game was going to show the death of Plagueis and the rise of Palpatine. That was definitely something we wanted to do because no one had ever seen that, a Sith throw over before, really.
Was that something they flagged with you as not wanting to do because it had never been explored before, like in a filmic sense, or they wanted to save the story?
Honestly, LucasArts was really cool with what we were doing.
Going that far and being promised so much that you're going to produce this game. And yeah, you don't have the guarantee that it's going to make it, but that feeling when you realized it was getting cancelled, how did you feel then and how did you react?
How did I react when it got canceled? I put a huge hole in the wall.
It's crushing. Because developing the Darth Maul game required a close relationship between Redfly and LucasArts, I wanted to get Dan's opinion on LucasArts, the video game publisher with a history of canceling Star Wars games.
I've worked with some shitty-ass publishers in my life. LucasArts was not one of them.
That's amazing.
They did whatever it took.
Yeah.
They wanted us to only work on the Darth Maul project, and they wanted a trilogy, and they wanted, to continue, so they did entertain that. They went into a boardroom with the instruction of, hey, we're going to greenlight the Darth Maul project for production, and we're going to also acquire your studio. They came out and told us the game was canceled, and they canceled everything because it was at that time. We didn't know, but it was at that time that the board had been told by Lucas that he wanted to sell the company.
Sure.
So they just pulled the plugs on everything. It wasn't just us. I mean, they pulled the plug on 1313.
Yeah,
they pulled
of course.
Whatever they were doing.
Did you have a hope that one day it was going to get revived or?
Sure. Of course.
In 2015, the cancelled Darth Maul game had a short-lived revival when Dan held an AMA on Reddit with the hopes of resurrecting some interest in the game. Around this time, EA and Disney found out about the project.
Yeah. We tried to approach them and just, nothing ever happened. Times are probably better for it now than it was. With The Mandalorian coming out, if they're going to go down a Darth Maul storyline, seeing the massive single-player success with Jedi Fallen Order.
So can you ever see it being made then? A project that's now, initially 10 years old?
I think at some point a Darth Maul game would get made.
How would it make you feel then if, next year EA suddenly came out with the Darth Maul game?
I mean, I would feel vindicated that they wanted to make a game that we wanted to make.
I wanted to talk to you about Jedi Fallen Order and how you think your Darth Maul game compares to that.
Fallen Order is obviously a ton more refined. I think, at the time we were shooting the game that was the big hit was Arkham Asylum. I mean, I don't think it compares to Jedi Order. I mean, obviously, Jedi Order is a great game. We didn't have any real cohesive gameplay that was, like I said, that was one thing. It was all sort of test cases, compartmentalized gameplay. Like we had, probe droid. We had, here's combat, here's stealth, here's this. We didn't really have an opportunity to make it into the one game play that I think would have been nice and polished. So
the Darth Maul project was going to be a game like no other Star Wars game ever made. It was a game being made for adults, violence, sex, and M-rated title. Part of the confusion Dan had after meeting with George Lucas was around Darth Talon, the comic book character. Lucas wanted her in the game alongside Maul, even though the characters are separated by about 170 years in the Star Wars timeline. I asked Dan about his reaction to this and about the gameplay mechanics being built for Maul. How is it going to work and play?
There was this desire for Darth Talon to be sort of the Lauren Bacall of the game, had to be smart and sexy. And this is going to be a mature title. They were talking about being an M-rated game, which is bonkers back then. I mean, for Star Wars, that was crazy.
Unheard of. Is that what you're saying?
It was absolutely unheard of. Yeah, absolutely unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say right now, the Mandalorian's probably close to that.
Yeah.
This is Maul. He's an animal. He cuts limbs off and heads off. I mean, our entire demo had cutting people's heads off. It was really a stealth game. It was an infiltration stealth mechanic. Maul was always infiltrating and trying to hide his tracks.
Sure.
And you were supposed to be on these covert secret missions, and the last thing that you wanted to do was leave a bunch of, bodies lying around.
Yeah, gotcha.
We would sort of move the player into these scenarios where you're going to have to kill everybody in this room because it cannot get out that you're there.
Yeah, that's interesting you took that approach. It's not a full frontal just attack.
No.
Everyone thinks Maul is an aggressive kind of character, but he's also a very thoughtful, cunning villain.
Yeah, all the Sith Lords they're not going to roll into something. Even in episode 1, they were super thoughtful and they only attacked the Jedi when they were ready to let everybody know that they're there.
Absolutely. One of the game's most unique gameplay features was what Dan calls a reverse fear mechanic.
When we had him infiltrating some of the Black Sun and there's tons of people around or tons of aliens around and they see him, we try to use what we call a reverse fear mechanic. And you pull someone into the shadows and kill them.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, the fear slider on these characters would go up. And if you could get them to sort of become really afraid and make mistakes, and they ended up, killing themselves somehow, not shooting themselves or whatever, but making mistakes like fighting with each other or walking into a furnace or, running away and running through a barrier that kills them, you would try to get your fear meter up.
Sure.
And the characters who were the fodder characters, it was fun. It would literally flip out, right? And they'd, make some sort of ridiculous, stupid mistake. And that was fun to watch. But the hardcore guys, they're not going to be scared of anything, right? So you would have to meet them.
How much of that is already built?
Well, I mean, not a lot. So we built tons of mechanics. We had a probe droid mechanic where you would click off a Maul and use his probe droid to scout out places, map places. We had fighting mechanics where it was pretty much Arkham Asylum. We had mechanics where you would tag team with Talon. A mechanic where someone would shoot you and you would reflect their laser shot back to them, in hopes that instead of it just being automatic, there was some skill involved.
Sure.
Maybe there was too much, but what we were doing is we were trying to find the game. And, we only worked on it a little bit over a year. So that was a big game.
Yeah, you really didn't get the time it deserved.
No.
Had it fallen on either side of the LucasArts shutdown and Disney merger, do you think its chances would have been higher of being completed?
Oh, man, I have no idea. I mean, LucasArts is notorious for killing projects.
Yeah. Dan told me a little bit more about his meeting with George Lucas. They only had one meeting that lasted a couple of hours, but it seems so memorable because of how bizarre it was. I think it gives you an insight into how things were done at LucasArts back when George was still running Lucasfilm.
We sat there and we were trying to take notes because he was laying out the story.
Sure.
And I had this big notepad with story beats on it, and I was crossing mine out, and he laughed. He goes, "Yeah, that happens a lot." And I was like, okay. Jeez. And then he started to tell us all about what he wanted and how he wanted all this Mass Effect conversation system.
Interesting.
And
okay.
We were just like, okay.
I also asked Dan about how he and his team were going to tackle George Lucas's desire for having Darth Talon in the game.
We were treating it as that Maul's heir was the main character, and it wasn't Maul. Talon was very popular in the comic book, and with extended universe people. When he said Maul is an heir of Maul, then it opened up the door where he could actually be an heir. I mean, look at what happened with Rise of Skywalker. She's a Palpatine. Maul could be our character could be a clone or whatever. In Talon's universe, the character of the Sith was Krayt, Darth Krayt, and he wanted to remove the rule of 2. And he basically was like, "Look, I'll just teach all the Sith, and I'll have 1,000 Sith Lords at my disposal." Mm-hmm. However we could move Maul into that time period, we thought that would be a good thing for him because he would want to bring back the rule of 2. Basically, it meant that Maul was going on a mission to reinstitute the Sith as a rule of 2, a master and an apprentice, against all these Sith under this Darth Krayt, and he was just going to tear it down. Plus, it's bad guy versus bad guy. Yeah, so I mean, there was stuff there to play with. We just couldn't figure out how to get Maul to Talon.
With the Talon angle as well, was it going to be like a tag team kind of game where you could switch between both and play as them both?
But yeah, the gameplay was such that, you know, you could throw your saber and she could catch it.
Oh, damn.
All the stuff that Rey and Kylo Ren do in Rise, they switch sabers.
There was going to be that dynamic between, or something like that dynamic.
Well, the way that we thought about it was Batman and Catwoman.
In 2019, Dan was forced to shut down Redfly Studio, but also recently opened a new studio called Marching Cube. What happened to Dawn of Fire?
Oh, nothing. It's just sitting on the shelf. I started Marching Cube. Well, I started back in 2016, but it wasn't really started until summer of last year. That's when I turned it on. We actually had some small jobs and stuff like that. No, Marching Cube was acquired by Keyword Studios in January.
Okay, sure. And are you seeing that as a successful relationship? What are you working on now?
Well, I can't say Keywords is a big sort of outsourcing studio. They do development and co-development, and they have 50 studios across the world. So we're working on basically becoming an Austin hub for them.
I'd previously heard that Dan still occasionally worked on the Maul game with his team, even though it was cancelled a while back. I asked him if they still work on it. So you've updated your game into Unreal Engine 4. How much of that exists, and do you still work on it now?
No, we don't work on it now.
Okay.
It just seemed like such a lost cause, right? Like nobody was gonna go for it or anything like that.
I remember reading you said you always had a candle on for the Darth Maul game.
Sure, of course. Chances are, not that there's a chance, I don't want to say, but chances are better now than they ever have been.
Dan Borth is a man with a vision. He's optimistic, and although the chances of this Darth Maul game being resurrected and released are extremely slim, there's something in him that still wants to see it made, even if that may never happen. And if that's the case, he's moved on to his next project as the CEO of Marching Cube. His new studio is made up of the core team who worked at Redfly, the core team who worked on the Darth Maul game. I want to wish him the best of luck for his future projects, and a huge thanks for the opportunity to interview him. So now that you've heard from the creator of the Darth Maul game himself, I want to know if you'd still love to see a Darth Maul game made, and which of Dan's ideas did you like the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see my full video on the history of the Darth Maul game, go watch this video here. This is actually how Dan got in touch with me. He saw this video pop up on his YouTube feed.
You know, I'll get Star Wars this, recommended stuff, and then all of a sudden it just popped up and it's like, this is from 3 weeks ago. Who the fuck is doing a Darth Maul thing?
Oh my god.
You know?
And follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Discord for more Star Wars gaming, news on cancelled games, join my Star Wars gaming community, and more. There's lots more there. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.
Stay bombastic.